What happens when love turns into silence, and the person you trusted most becomes a stranger? Bella thought she knew her husband, James, his laugh, his touch, his promises. But on their 5th wedding anniversary, she found herself sitting alone at a candlelit table, waiting for a man who never showed up. As the night unfolded, secrets spilled out, truths shattered illusions, and choices were made that would change everything forever. This is more than just a story of betrayal. It's about courage, heartbreak, and the moment one woman decided to take back control of her life. Are you ready to uncover what lies beneath the surface of this broken marriage? Bella and James had been married for 5 years. Their love story began like a fairy tale, filled with whispered promises and tender moments that defined the first 4 years of their union. They were not the couple who relied on grand gestures or extravagant declarations of affection. Instead, their love thrived in the small, everyday details. James would kiss Bella's forehead before leaving for work, and they would dance in the kitchen on lazy Sunday mornings, their laughter filling the air. Evenings were spent sharing inside jokes, fingers intertwined as they strolled through quiet streets under the stars. They had built a life together, one that felt complete without children, a conscious decision they made early on, not because they didn't dream of a family but because their bond felt so strong, so whole, that nothing seemed missing. But marriages, even the happiest ones, are fragile things. What begins as a rhythm of love and companionship can unravel slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you wake up and realize that the person lying beside you is no longer the same soul who once promised forever. For Bella and James, this erosion began subtly, almost like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass, slow, silent, yet relentless. It started with missed texts. James, who used to reply instantly even during his busiest days, now took hours to respond, or sometimes didn't respond at all. When he did, his messages were short, clipped, devoid of the warmth that once characterized them. Bella tried to dismiss these changes as stress from work. After all, James had always been ambitious, pushing himself harder than necessary to climb the corporate ladder. "Sorry, babe," he'd say when she asked about his growing absences. "Just a crazy day." His tone was casual, almost dismissive, but Bella chose to believe him. She wanted to believe him. Yet, over time, the cracks widened. The late nights at the office became more frequent, and his explanations grew thinner. He stopped asking about her day, stopped sharing his thoughts, stopped seeing her as his partner. One evening, as Bella folded laundry, James walked into the room still dressed in his work clothes. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression distant. "I might have to travel for work next month," he said casually, tossing his keys onto the table. Something twisted in Bella's stomach. Travel? James's company rarely sent employees out of town, and when they did, it was always pre-planned months in advance. She used to be the first person he told about such plans, but now he barely met her eyes. That night, as James showered, Bella picked up his phone from the counter. It was locked, something James never used to do. Her heart raced as she placed it back exactly where she found it, pretending she hadn't noticed. But the doubt had already taken root. That night, she curled up next to him, searching for the warmth they once shared. She traced her fingers along his arm, the way she always did when she needed reassurance. He didn't pull away, but he didn't pull her closer either. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. There was a long pause. "Of course I am," he finally said, pressing a brief kiss to her forehead. But his voice lacked the certainty it once held, and that was the moment Bella knew. The first signs of trouble crept into Bella's consciousness like shadows at dusk, faint at first, but impossible to ignore as they grew darker. She began noticing the subtle shifts in James's behavior, the way he always kept his phone face down on the table, the absent-minded smiles he directed at its screen, the secretive glances he stole when he thought she wasn't looking. These moments gnawed at her, planting seeds of doubt that refused to be uprooted. At first, Bella tried to rationalize his actions. Maybe he was overwhelmed by work. Maybe the pressure of his job was consuming him. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. One night, unable to sleep, Bella lay awake staring at the ceiling while James snored softly beside her. The digital clock glowed 2:47 a.m., casting an eerie light across the room. Her mind raced with questions she dared not ask aloud. Why had he stopped confiding in her? Why did he seem so detached? And most importantly, who was he texting so late at night? The answers eluded her, but the silence between them had become unbearable. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of two people who understood each other without words. It was heavy, suffocating, a chasm widening with every passing day. Bella wrestled with her suspicions for weeks, torn between confronting James and protecting what little remained of their marriage. But one evening, as she stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed answers, even if they shattered the fragile illusion of their relationship. With trembling hands, she opened her laptop and typed a query into the search bar. How to hire a private investigator. The results flooded the screen, offering a mix of advice and warnings. Hiring someone to spy on your spouse felt extreme, invasive, something reserved for tabloids and soap operas. Yet, here she was, considering it. The next morning, Bella sat in the waiting room of Michael Harrington Private Investigations, her palms slick with sweat. The office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, its walls adorned with framed certificates and awards. When Michael called her name, she followed him into his cluttered office, where stacks of files and surveillance equipment hinted at the stories he had uncovered. "What brings you here today?" he asked gently, his tone professional yet empathetic. Bella hesitated, her throat tightening as she struggled to articulate her fears. "I think my husband is hiding something," as she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's changed. He's distant, distracted, and I don't know what to do anymore." Michael nodded, jotting notes on a legal pad. "We'll start with basic surveillance," he explained. "Follow him discreetly, document his movements. If there's anything suspicious, we'll find it." As Bella left the office, her heart pounded with a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because she was finally taking action, and dread because she feared what the truth might reveal. Over the next few weeks, Michael kept her updated via text messages and emails, sending cryptic updates that only heightened her anxiety. Then, one rainy afternoon, he called her into his office again. This time, his desk was littered with photographs, timestamps, and damning evidence of James's betrayal. Bella stared at the images, her breath catching in her throat. There was James, sitting at a dimly lit bar, leaning close to another woman. In one photo, his hand rested possessively on her thigh. In another, his lips grazed her ear as she laughed, her head tilted toward him in a gesture of intimacy. The final blow came when Michael handed her a USB drive containing video footage. She hesitated before playing it, her finger hovering over the play button. When she finally pressed it, the screen revealed James smiling, the same smile he used to reserve for her, whispering something into the woman's ear, his eyes alight with affection. Bella exhaled sharply, her hands trembling as she set the phone down. The truth was undeniable, and yet it hit her like a tidal wave. James wasn't working late. He wasn't stressed or overwhelmed. He was having an affair, and he had been for some time. The weight of this realization settled heavily on her chest, but amidst the pain, a strange calm emerged. For months, she had lived in limbo, caught between hope and despair. Now, there was clarity. James had made his choice, and now it was time for her to make hers. Determined to reclaim agency over her life, Bella devised a plan, a final attempt to salvage what was left of their marriage. Their 5th anniversary was approaching, and she booked a reservation at Oceanair, a luxurious restaurant known for its candlelit ambience and exquisite cuisine. She imagined the scene, just the two of them, seated at a private table overlooking the ocean, reminiscing about the love they once shared. Perhaps, she thought, if James saw how much she cared, he would come back to her. On the evening of their anniversary, Bella arrived at the restaurant early, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. She wore the bracelet James had given her on their first anniversary, a symbol of the love they had vowed to nurture. As she waited, the waiter approached cautiously, his eyes flickering to the empty chair across from her. "Would you like me to keep the food warm a little longer, he asked politely. "No," Bella replied, forcing a smile. "He'll be here soon." But deep down, she knew he wouldn't come. Hours passed, and the restaurant buzzed around her, couples laughing, glasses clinking, but Bella sat alone, staring at the flickering candlelight. Her phone buzzed in her bag, and she pulled it out, expecting to see a message from James apologizing for being late. Instead, it was an update from the private investigator. Attached to the message was a new photo, James sitting at a different restaurant with the same woman, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. Bella's breath hitched as she stared at the image. The betrayal was complete. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of it wash over her. When she opened them again, she signaled for the waiter. "I'm ready to order," as she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She ordered James's favorite meal, savoring the irony of celebrating their anniversary without him. Later that night, Bella returned home, her resolve hardened. She had packed her belongings earlier, leaving behind only the divorce papers, the USB drive, and a handwritten note. As she stepped into the car, she glanced back at the house one last time, committing its silhouette to memory. By the time James arrived home, expecting to explain away his absence, he would find nothing but emptiness. James pulled into the driveway, his car tires crunching against the gravel as he parked under the dim glow of the porch light, or rather, where the porch light should have been. It was off. The house loomed before him like a shadowy silhouette, its windows dark and unwelcoming. A cold knot tightened in his stomach. Something felt wrong. He cut the engine but didn't move immediately, sitting frozen behind the wheel with his hands gripping it tightly. His phone lay on the passenger seat, the screen still lit from Bella's final message, *y happy anniversary, James. Consider this my gift to you. Below the text were attachments, photos, videos, undeniable proof of his betrayal. He had barely glanced at them when he excused himself from dinner with the other woman, muttering some vague excuse about work emergencies. Now, those images haunted him, a collage of guilt and shame that replayed endlessly in his mind. He could still see her face, the stranger across the table whose name he couldn't even remember clearly now. She had smiled at him, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him, while he fumbled for his keys, desperate to escape. But escaping wasn't going to save him. Not tonight. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves decaying on the ground. As James stepped out of the car, the sound of his footsteps echoed unnaturally loud against the silence of the night. Normally, there would be warmth here, the soft hum of music Bella liked to play, the comforting aroma of vanilla candles she always kept burning, but tonight, nothing greeted him except an eerie void. Even the familiar creak of the front door sounded alien, as though the house itself no longer recognized him. As James stepped inside, his breath hitched. The lights were off, plunging the entryway into near-total darkness. Fumbling along the wall, he found the switch and flipped it on. Light flooded the space, revealing what he feared most, emptiness. The console table near the door, once adorned with fresh flowers and framed photographs, was bare. No clutter, no personal touches, no signs of life. The hallway leading deeper into the house stretched ahead of him, eerily quiet. Each step he took seemed to echo louder than the last, amplifying the weight pressing down on his chest. His heart raced as he moved through the living room. The couches, still pristine and arranged perfectly, looked untouched, almost showroom-like. The bookshelves that had once overflowed with novels, photo albums, and knickknacks Bella collected over the years were empty. There wasn't a single trace of her presence left behind. The walls, which used to be covered with their memories, wedding photos, vacation snapshots, candid moments captured during lazy weekends, was stark and barren. It was as if Bella had erased herself entirely, leaving behind only the shell of a home they once shared. Panic began to rise in his throat as he pushed open the door to their bedroom. Or rather, what used to be their bedroom. The closet doors stood wide open, revealing empty racks where her clothes used to hang neatly. Her shoes, once lined up in perfect rows, were gone. The jewelry box he'd gifted her on their first anniversary, the one she cherished so much, was nowhere to be found. Even the bathroom counter, usually cluttered with her perfume bottles, makeup brushes, and hair ties, was wiped clean. The faint scent of vanilla, which had lingered in the air for years and reminded him of her, had vanished completely. James sank onto the edge of the bed, his legs trembling beneath him. This wasn't just packing up belongings, this was erasure. Every piece of Bella's life here had been meticulously removed, leaving behind only hollow spaces. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his breathing, but the crushing realization hit him like a freight train. She wasn't coming back. She hadn't left in anger or haste. She had planned this carefully, deliberately stripping away everything that tied her to him. And now, standing amidst the emptiness, he understood why. Before James could fully process the magnitude of what he was seeing, his phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. He lunged for it, his pulse racing. For a brief, foolish moment, hope flickered inside him. Maybe it was Bella calling. Maybe she wanted to talk, to scream, to cry, anything that might mean she still cared enough to acknowledge him. But when he saw the name flashing on the screen, his stomach dropped. It wasn't Bella. It was her star. The other woman. His fingers hovered over the call button, trembling. Should he answer? What would he even say? Reluctantly, he swiped to accept the call, holding the phone to his ear with dread pooling in his gut. Hey, came her voice, light and casual, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding on his end. Everything okay? You left so suddenly. James froze, the words cutting through him like shards of glass. How dare she call him now? How dare she act like she mattered? He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to respond. I'm fine, he muttered, his tone clipped and devoid of emotion. Just dealing with something. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a laugh that grated on his nerves. You are such a mystery sometimes, as she teased, her voice dripping with flirtation. But hey, we should finish what we started. Dinner was fun, right? James's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Fun? Was that what she thought this was? A game? A distraction? He felt bile rising in his throat as he realized how little he truly meant to her, and how much worse, how much more meaningless their relationship had been compared to what he had with Bella. I don't think so, he said abruptly, his voice sharp enough to startle her into silence. We're done. What? She stammered, caught off guard. What do you mean done? Did I do something wrong? No, he snapped, his patience snapping like a frayed rope. You didn't do anything. That's the problem. None of it ever mattered. Without waiting for a response, he ended the call, his thumb jabbing at the red button with ferocity. The phone clattered onto the bed, and James buried his face in his hands, his body shaking with a mixture of rage and despair. He had risked everything. For this? For someone who barely registered as a blip on his radar? The sheer absurdity of it all made him want to scream. Finally, unable to avoid it any longer, James turned his attention to the small white envelope sitting on the nightstand. It was the only thing left behind, placed there with deliberate precision. He reached for it hesitantly, his fingers brushing against the smooth paper. Inside, he found 3 items: the divorce papers, already signed by Bella, a USB drive containing the damning evidence of his betrayal, and a handwritten note folded neatly. His eyes scanned the divorce papers first, his name staring back at him alongside hers. 5 years of marriage reduced to a few printed pages, waiting for his signature. She hadn't asked for explanations, hadn't begged for closure. She had simply ended it, final and unforgiving. Flipping through the documents, he noticed the date, today. Their 5th anniversary. The irony was cruel, almost poetic. Next, he picked up the USB drive, its small size belying the weight of its contents. He didn't need to plug it in to know what awaited him: photos of him with the other woman, timestamps marking each moment of his infidelity, videos capturing the intimacy he had shared with someone else. Bella had gathered every shred of evidence, ensuring he couldn't deny or rationalize his actions. She hadn't screamed at him, hadn't cried or pleaded. Instead, she had presented him with the truth, forcing him to face the consequences head-on. Finally, he unfolded the note, his hands trembling. Her handwriting was familiar yet distant, the slant of her letters betraying none of the emotions she must have felt while writing it. Just 4 simple words: *y happy anniversary. Consider this your last surprise. *. The impact of those words hit him like a punch to the gut. No anger, no accusations, no pleas for reconciliation. Only finality. Bella had walked away, not in tears or desperation but with calm resolve. She had chosen freedom over forgiveness, strength over weakness. And now, James was left alone with the wreckage of his choices. Sitting on the edge of the bed, surrounded by emptiness, James allowed the full weight of his actions to crash over him. He thought about all the times Bella had tried to reconnect with him, reaching out silently in ways he had ignored. He remembered the way she used to laugh, her eyes lighting up when she told him about her day. He recalled the late-night drives they used to take, the inside jokes that made them feel like they existed in their own private universe. Those moments, once taken for granted, now felt impossibly precious. For the first time, James grasped the permanence of what he had done. Bella wasn't just gone because of the affair, she was gone because of how he had treated her throughout their marriage. He had stopped seeing her, stopped valuing her, stopped loving her the way she deserved. And now, she had returned the favor, leaving him with nothing but the hollow shell of a life they once built together. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at the note, the divorce papers, the USB drive. There was no fixing this. No amount of apologies or promises could undo the damage he had caused. Bella had given him chances, given him time, and he had squandered every second of it. Now, she had moved on, and he was left alone with the consequences of his betrayal. The silence in the house pressed against him, suffocating and unrelenting. James knew he would never forget this feeling, the emptiness, the regret, the bitter sting of knowing he had lost the best thing in his life. And for what? A fleeting distraction, a meaningless connection that paled in comparison to the love he had thrown away. As dawn broke outside, casting pale light through the windows, James remained seated on the bed, clutching the note in his hand. He didn't sleep that night, or many nights after. Because for the first time, he truly understood. He had destroyed the one thing that mattered most, and there was no going back. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Bella's small rented apartment, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. She stood by the window, cradling a steaming mug of coffee in her hands, watching as the city below slowly came to life. The distant hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, and the occasional honk of a car horn formed a symphony that felt strangely comforting. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Bella felt truly alive. She had spent the night unpacking her belongings, arranging them carefully in the modest space she now called home. Each item carried memories of her past, but they no longer weighed her down. Instead, they served as reminders of how far she had come. The bracelet James had given her on their first anniversary sat quietly in a jewelry box, tucked away alongside other mementos. It was not a symbol of regret or bitterness. It was simply a piece of history, a chapter closed. Bella sipped her coffee, letting its warmth spread through her chest. She thought about James, wondering if he had found the envelope yet, if he had seen the divorce papers, the USB drive, and the note. Would he try to call her? Would he beg for forgiveness? A part of her hoped he would realize the gravity of his mistakes, but deep down, she knew better than to expect anything from him. Their marriage was over, and she refused to look back. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, startling her momentarily. She glanced at it, half expecting to see James's name flashing on the screen. But it wasn't him. It was a message from Sarah, her best friend, checking in. Bella smiled faintly before typing a quick reply. Asterisk, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Asterisk, and for the first time, she meant it. Later that afternoon, as Bella settled into her new routine, there was a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? She hadn't told anyone except Sarah about her move, and even then, she had only mentioned the neighborhood, not the exact address. Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, it wasn't James standing there, it was the other woman. Bella froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. What was she doing here? How had she found her? After a moment of hesitation, she opened the door slightly, keeping the chain lock secure. Can I help you? She asked coolly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The other woman shifted uncomfortably, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She looked younger up close, almost fragile, her eyes darting nervously around the hallway. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you, as she began, her voice trembling. My name is Lucy. I need to talk to you. Bella raised an eyebrow, her grip tightening on the edge of the door. About what? Lucy hesitated, biting her lip. It's about James. He showed me the photos. The videos. Everything. Bella's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to remain composed. She didn't owe this woman anything, not explanations, not sympathy, nothing. Still, something in Lucy's tone made her pause. There was vulnerability in her voice, a rawness that reminded Bella of herself during those dark nights when she had questioned her worth. Against her better judgment, Bella unlatched the chain and stepped aside, gesturing for Lucy to enter. The tension in the air was palpable as Lucy walked in, her movements hesitant, as though she expected Bella to lash out at any moment. I don't know why I'm here, Lucy admitted, sinking onto the edge of the couch. But after seeing those pictures, hearing him defend himself like none of it mattered, I realized something. I realized I was just a distraction. A placeholder. And I hate myself for it. Bella studied her silently, her expression unreadable. She had imagined countless scenarios where she confronted the other woman, angry words, tears, accusations, but this wasn't one of them. This was different. This was human. "You should leave," Bella said finally, her voice soft but firm. "This isn't your fight. It's mine. And James's." Lucy nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. But I wanted you to know. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know he was married until it was too late." By then, as she trailed off, shaking her head, "I'm so sorry." Bella didn't respond immediately. She simply watched as Lucy wiped her tears, her shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. Finally, Bella spoke, her words measured and deliberate. "You can't undo what's been done. But you can choose not to make the same mistakes again. That's all any of us can do." With that, Bella escorted Lucy to the door, closing it gently behind her. As she leaned against the frame, exhaling slowly, she felt a strange sense of relief. Forgiveness wasn't something she was ready to offer, not to Lucy, and certainly not to James. But understanding? That was possible. And sometimes, that was enough. Meanwhile, James wandered aimlessly through the empty house, his footsteps echoing against the silence. The walls, once adorned with photographs and trinkets that told the story of their life together, were now barren, stripped of every trace of Bella. Even the scent of vanilla, which had lingered in the air for years and reminded him of her, had vanished completely. The house felt foreign, hollow, like a museum exhibit frozen in time. He replayed every moment of their marriage in his mind, searching for the point where everything went wrong. When had he stopped seeing Bella? When had he stopped valuing her? Was it the late nights at work? The excuses? The lies? Or had it been something deeper, something more insidious, a slow erosion of love, masked by familiarity and complacency? James sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. The envelope lay on the coffee table, its contents mocking him. The divorce papers, already signed by Bella, stared back at him like an accusation. Next to them sat the USB drive, containing undeniable proof of his betrayal. And then there was the note, folded neatly, its words cutting deeper than any scream or argument ever could. Asterisk happy anniversary. Consider this your last surprise. Asterisk. Tears streamed down his face as he reread the note, each word sinking in like a dagger. This wasn't just the end of their marriage, it was the end of the illusion he had clung to for so long. He had convinced himself that his affair didn't matter, that Bella would never find out, that he could keep living two separate lives without consequences. But now, surrounded by the emptiness of the house, he realized how wrong he had been. Bella had been his constant, his safe place, his home. And he had thrown it all away. For what? For someone who barely registered as a blip on his radar? For a fleeting connection that paled in comparison to the love he had shared with her? As the days turned into weeks, James struggled to adjust to his new reality. He tried calling Bella multiple times, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. "Please, wretch, we can fix this," he pleaded in one message. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance." But she never responded. Eventually, he stopped calling altogether, resigning himself to the fact that she was gone, for good. The loneliness consumed him. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on work. Every room in the house reminded him of her, the way she used to hum while cooking dinner, the way she curled up on the couch with a book, the way she always left a trail of perfume wherever she went. The memories haunted him, taunting him with what he had lost. One evening, as he sat alone in the dimly lit living room, he picked up the USB drive. For weeks, he had avoided looking at its contents, unable to face the truth it held. But now, Driven by a mixture of guilt and curiosity, he plugged it into his laptop. The screen filled with images and videos, proof of his betrayal, captured in excruciating detail. He watched as he leaned in close to Lucy, whispering secrets meant only for her ears. He saw the way he smiled at her, the way he touched her, the way he looked at her like she was the center of his universe. His breath hitched as he scrolled through the files, each image a reminder of the choices he had made. He had risked everything. For this? For something so meaningless, so shallow? The realization hit him like a freight train, leaving him gasping for air. He had destroyed the best thing in his life, and there was no undoing it. In the months that followed, Bella threw herself into rebuilding her life. She started taking art classes, something she had always wanted to do but never had the courage to pursue. She reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and embraced the freedom that came with self-respect. For the first time in years, she felt whole, not because of a man, but because of who she was. James, on the other hand, embarked on a journey of self-reflection. He quit his high-pressure job, moved to a smaller apartment, and began therapy. Slowly, painfully, he started confronting the flaws that had led to the destruction of his marriage. He learned to take responsibility for his actions, to value honesty and integrity, and to appreciate the people in his life who still cared about him. Though their paths diverged permanently, both Bella and James emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of what truly mattered. They had lost each other, but in doing so, they had found themselves. And sometimes, that was the greatest gift of all. As the story of Bella and James comes to a close, it leaves us with an important reminder. Life is too short to stay in relationships or situations that no longer serve us. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Are there choices you've been avoiding? Conversations you need to have? Or perhaps it's time to let go of something, or someone, that no longer brings you joy. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking stories that touch the heart. Your support helps us create content that inspires, heals, and empowers. And remember, endings are not always sad. They can be new beginnings waiting to unfold. Thank you for joining me today. You've been an amazing part of this experience, and I'm so grateful to have shared this moment with you. Until next time, goodbye, and see you again soon.